Sometimes, survival isn't about bravery, it isn't about strength. It's about a decision so small, so ordinary, that nobody else notices it, until it changes everything. This is the story of one woman, a late-night taxi, and the choice that saved dozens of lives. What would you have done if you were in her place? Night had fallen across the quiet city, the streets shimmering under a thin layer of rain. Streetlights flickered, scattering reflections across the slick pavement. A line of taxis idled along the curb, their headlights glowing faintly in the mist. People hurried in and out of cars, chasing destinations, chasing warmth, chasing time. Among them was Elena, a young woman carrying the exhaustion of a long day on her shoulders. She clutched her bag, glanced at her phone, and exhaled deeply. The last train had already departed. The taxi stand was her only option. A driver leaned out of his window, tapping the side of his car with a gloved hand. "Taxi?" he gestured. Elena hesitated. Something inside her shifted, not fear, not paranoia, but a quiet unease, the kind that lingers, like a whisper you can't quite hear. She took a step forward, then stopped. Her pulse quickened, though the night was calm. She couldn't explain it, even to herself. The driver looked ordinary, his car clean, his meter blinking. Still, her chest tightened. Her instinct screamed, "Don't get in." The rain grew heavier, urging her toward shelter, but she shook her head and stepped back. The driver frowned, shrugged, and drove away, merging into the stream of headlights. Another taxi rolled forward, but she turned away completely now, retreating into the glow of a 24-hour cafe instead. Inside, warmth embraced her. She ordered coffee she didn't need, sat by the window, and watched as strangers climbed into cabs, one after another. Guilt gnawed at her. Was she being silly? Irrational? She didn't know. All she knew was that something inside her whispered to wait. The minutes stretched into hours. Outside, the night deepened, and then, far down the street, flashing red and blue lights shattered the calm. The cafe windows rattled faintly as the first siren screamed through the night. Elena's gaze snapped upward. Out on the street, streaks of red and blue tore through the rain, reflecting in long ribbons across the asphalt. Police cars swerved past, followed by an ambulance. Lights, pulsing like frantic heartbeats. Conversations inside the cafe faltered. Strangers turned to the glass, eyes wide, spoons paused halfway to their lips. Something was happening, and it was close. Elena's stomach tightened. She pressed her palm against the window, as though trying to anchor herself to the moment. Just beyond the corner, the sirens clustered, their flashing lights painting the dark buildings with violent color. People rushed outside to look. She stayed still, pulse hammering, unable to shake the gnawing thought. What if? Minutes dragged. The street outside was cordoned off with yellow tape, officers moving quickly in coordinated silence. Then the sound came. A muffled blast, deep and hollow, like the earth itself had shuddered. The cafe lights flickered once. Gasps rippled through the room. Somewhere, glass shattered. Elena's coffee cup rattled against its saucer. Her breath caught. The blast had come from the direction of the taxi line. She rose slowly, legs trembling. Through the streaming window, she saw smoke curling upward, black and acrid against the pale rain. People outside screamed, running from the chaos. Officers shouted commands. Paramedics rushed toward the wreckage, her chest constricted. That taxi, the one she had refused. It had been part of it. She could see the twisted metal now, a burned shell in the glow of emergency lights. The driver's face flashed in her mind. Ordinary, unremarkable, and yet, the realization hit her with brutal force. Her hesitation, that small decision to step back, had pulled her away from catastrophe. But as the truth settled in, another thought pierced through the fog. Dozens of others hadn't been as fortunate. Some had taken taxis, some had been nearby, and now their lives had been shattered. Elena pressed a hand to her chest, heart racing. Survivors streamed past the cafe, eyes wide, clothes torn, faces pale with shock. She wanted to help, to move, to do something, but her body was frozen, in place. Outside, the sirens wailed on. The smoke thickened, drifting upward into the midnight sky, staining the rain with ash. Elena stood pressed against the cafe window, her reflection trembling in the glass. Behind her, murmurs rose like a tide, strangers trying to make sense of what they'd just witnessed. Words like explosion and attack floated through the air, sharp, fragile, terrifying. Her mind replayed it all in fragments. The driver's steady eyes, the tap of his gloved hand against the door, her own hesitation, that single, unexplainable refusal. She tried to breathe, but guilt wrapped around her like chains. Why had she been spared when others hadn't? If she had ignored her instincts, her name might already be among the casualties. The thought sent a chill down her spine. Outside, first responders worked with relentless urgency. Stretchers appeared. Paramedics knelt beside broken forms, their hands moving quickly, desperately. Officers shouted for the crowd to stay back. Camera flashes lit the smoke as news crews arrived. The once ordinary street was now a stage of chaos. Elena pushed herself up, legs heavy, and stepped out into the cold night. The rain washed across her face as she moved closer, drawn by something she couldn't name. Her shoes splashed in shallow puddles, her steps slow, hesitant. She wasn't part of it, not really. Yet she couldn't turn away. The wreckage was worse up close. Twisted metal bent into unnatural shapes. Windows shattered, fragments scattered across the asphalt. A taxi door, ripped free, lay yards away like a discarded toy. The acrid scent of fuel and smoke burned her throat. Elena clutched her coat tighter around herself. She wanted to cover her ears to shut out the cries of the wounded. But the sounds cut through her, reminders that every face around her belonged to someone's parent, sibling, child. She wasn't just looking at wreckage. She was looking at stolen futures. A paramedic brushed past, carrying a child no older than 6. The boy's eyes were open, glassy with shock, his tiny fists clutching a toy car blackened by soot. Elena felt her knees weaken. Her own survival didn't feel like luck anymore. It felt like a burden. Why had she felt the urge to step away? Why had she been given the chance to live when others hadn't? Was it instinct? Fate? Or something she would never understand? She didn't have answers. Only the unbearable weight of knowing that one choice, a refusal so small it almost went unnoticed, had placed her here, alive, while others were carried past her on stretchers. The sirens wailed on. The rain kept falling, and Elena, caught between gratitude and grief, realized this night would never leave her. By dawn, the street no longer looked like the place Elena had walked hours before. The chaos had quieted, replaced by a grim stillness. Police lines stretched across the block, yellow tape fluttering like fragile warnings in the wind. The air smelled of smoke, metal, and something heavier, the weight of loss. Elena sat on the curb near the cafe, her coat damp, her hands trembling. Around her, survivors huddled together, silent and broken. News vans parked nearby, their antennas reaching skyward as reporters whispered into cameras, trying to stitch the fragments into a story the world could understand. She couldn't stop staring at the taxis, or what was left of them. The wreckage looked almost skeletal now, hollow frames that once carried ordinary lives to ordinary destinations. But nothing about this night had been ordinary. A detective approached the crowd, his face set in grim lines. He spoke to the reporters, briefly before moving down the line of shaken witnesses. Elena listened, her heart pounding. Words drifted to her in pieces. Device. Planted. Multiple vehicles. Coordinated. It hadn't been an accident. It hadn't been fate. Someone had chosen this street, these cars, these people, and she had almost been one of them. Her chest tightened as she pieced it together. That first driver, the one who had called to her, his hand tapping the door. That was the taxi that had erupted in flames. She saw it now, not coincidence, not instinct, but something darker. If she had stepped forward, her story would have ended in a headline. The thought chilled her blood. She hadn't just avoided danger. She had avoided being part of a plan. Police moved through the wreckage with gloves and evidence bags, careful, methodical. One officer lifted a scorched metal case from the debris. Another whispered into a radio. Their faces were grave, their movements heavy. Elena wrapped her arms around herself, shivering. Her decision to refuse that ride had been more than survival. If she had taken that seat, she might have been the one unknowingly carrying death into the city. The guilt shifted into something else now, a realization that her instincts hadn't only saved her, they had spared countless others. The taxi would have driven off, merged into traffic, carried its hidden danger farther, deeper, into a city still sleeping. Her breath caught as the truth settled in. Her no had drawn a line between devastation contained here and devastation that could have spread everywhere. The sun crept over the horizon, pale and fragile, touching the ruins with light. Reporters' voices grew louder, carrying the news across the airwaves. Potential attack averted, dozens saved, investigation ongoing. Elena closed her eyes, the weight pressing down on her shoulders heavier than ever. She was alive, but her survival had never been just about her. Days passed, but the night clung to Elena like a shadow. She moved through the city in silence, her body present, her mind elsewhere. Every sound of a car backfiring made her flinch. Every flicker of headlights dragged her back to the curb where she had stood, deciding whether to step into a taxi. News reports filled every screen. Words like attack prevented, dozens saved, and suspected network dismantled echoed everywhere. To the world, it was a headline. To Elena, it was a wound. She became a ghost among crowds. At work, she barely spoke. In the grocery store, she drifted down aisles like a sleepwalker. People around her carried on, their lives unshaken. But she carried the weight of knowing how thin the line had been between ordinary life and catastrophe. At night, sleep abandoned her. She lay, awake, replaying the moment again and again. The tap of the driver's glove, the unease she couldn't explain, the decision that saved her. But with every replay, a darker thought followed. What if I had ignored it? What if I had forced myself to be polite, to dismiss my fear? The possibilities haunted her. In one version, she was gone, her name among the dead. In another, she was the vessel, unknowingly carrying destruction deeper into the city. Each version ended in loss, and only one version, the one that had happened, left her here, alive, but tormented. The city praised the quick response of authorities. News anchors called it a miracle that the attack had been contained before spreading further. Elena wanted to believe in miracles, but she knew the truth. It hadn't been fate, it had been choice, her choice, and that truth was heavier than any miracle could ever be. One evening, she walked back to the cafe where it all began. The street was open again, traffic flowing as if nothing had happened. Fresh asphalt covered the scars. The wreckage was gone, but the memory remained. She sat by the same window, her reflection staring back at her through the glass. People outside hailed taxis, climbing in without hesitation, chasing destinations like she once had. To them, it was routine. To her, it was a reminder that every decision, no matter how small, how irrational, could mean the difference between life and death. For the first time, she understood that survival wasn't about being chosen by fate. It was about listening to the quiet, fragile instincts we too often ignore. That night, her refusal had saved dozens. But the price was knowing she would carry the weight of that decision forever. As the city lights flickered on, Elena pressed, her palm to the glass. She didn't feel like a hero. She didn't feel lucky. She felt human, fragile, breakable, but still here, and for now, that had to be enough. The city healed quickly, at least on the surface. Streets reopened, headlines shifted, and life carried on as though nothing had ever happened. But for Elena, time never flowed the same again. She moved through the days with sharper eyes, noticing details others overlooked, a hurried glance, a restless hand, a silence too deep. The world no longer felt safe, but fragile, like glass balanced on the edge of a table. One breath, one push, and everything could fall. Yet, beneath the unease, there was something else, a quiet clarity. She understood now that life wasn't measured only in years or accomplishments, but in moments of choice. Most choices passed unnoticed, forgotten as quickly as they came. But some, rare and hidden, were the kind that bent the course of everything. Her refusal of that ride had been one of those moments. A whisper in her chest, a flicker of unease, had separated life from death, survival from tragedy. Dozens of strangers went home to their families because she had listened. They would never know her name, never know what her hesitation had spared them from. And she was at peace with that. One evening, as the sun melted into the horizon, Elena stood at a crosswalk, watching a stream of taxis roll by. Their headlights cut through the dusk, ordinary, harmless, the way they had always been. For the first time since that night, she didn't feel paralyzed. She felt aware. The world hadn't changed, but she had. She understood that her story wasn't about luck or fate. It was about instinct, about the quiet voice we all carry, the one we silence when logic insists it's nothing. That night, she had listened. And that listening had saved lives. The rain began to fall, soft and steady, just as it had on the night everything changed. Elena lifted her face toward the sky, letting the drops wash over her. For the first time in weeks, she exhaled without trembling. Because survival, she realized, wasn't only about escaping death. It was about carrying life forward, living, even when the weight of knowing pressed heavy on her shoulders. And so she walked on, blending into the stream of people, another anonymous figure in the city night. The world didn't know what she had done, but the echo of that one choice, a single refusal, would live on in every life it had saved. Music swells, screen fades to black. Closing narration for viewers. Sometimes, the smallest choices hold the greatest power. A hesitation, a step back, a quiet refusal. They may not feel heroic in the moment, but they can change everything. Would you have listened if the voice inside you whispered to stop?